evening. Assalamu alaikum. First, I'd like to thank the Parliament for inviting me here today. I feel deeply honored and humbled to be here, considering that I really am at the beginning stages of my own journey. So I'd like to begin by talking to you about some emerging leaders who lived a long time ago. And then I'd like to talk to you about our project, Rebuild with Love, a Muslim-led initiative to help rebuild Black churches after they'd been burned down by arsonists in the South. I want to throw out some names to you. Faatimah bint Muhammad, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Aisha bint Abu Bakr, Mus'ab ibn Umair, Uthman ibn Affan, and Abu Huraira. They're Arabic names. Some of you will recognize these names because these are some of the most well-known companions of the Prophet Muhammad. Most Muslims would have some knowledge of these men and women. The reasons why I bring them up together as a group is because they were all young when Prophet Muhammad first got his revelation from God. And when we say they were present when he first received his revelation from God, we should remember what the revelation was. It was, in its own way, a revolution. It brought absolute chaos and dissension, but it also brought the most sublime, almost unreasonable brotherly and sisterly love that these people had ever seen. So when we say they were there, it means they saw him preach under the glorious light of the Arabian sun to people like themselves for whom the message had come just in time. It means they saw him threatened with death over and over again by those who found the message entirely inconvenient because of its social justice and egalitarian overtones. It means they sat with him while he told them how honored they should feel to be creations of God, honored with intellects, hearts, language, and beauty, and the ability to know their Lord. It means they sat with him while he questioned them as to the strength of their faith, that they could bear to go to sleep at night while their brother down the road lay awake, restless, kept there by the hollow pain in his stomach from lack of food. So we have all these young people being taught and nurtured in the ethics and spirituality of their religion, experiencing triumphs and challenges with the community. Then these young people go out and they literally change the world with the kind of tenacity and creativity that young people have at their best, nurtured but not sheltered, worldly but not broken. When I think of examples of these kinds of people in our current period, I think of Razan and Yusr, Abu Salha, and Dia Barakat, 3 Muslim students gunned down in their apartment in North Carolina, all 3 of whom were deeply invested in the health and welfare of refugees, which stands as a testament to the vibrancy and dynamism in the homes they grew up in and the people that they grew up with. Before I say more about the initiative itself, I'd like to speak to the history of targeting Black churches. We should keep in mind that attacks on Black churches are a very old form of intimidation in the South, historically used to strike fear into the hearts of Black people. So its results were both physical and psychological damage. Although it is true that arson at religious institutions has decreased over the decades, attacks on Black churches today are as haunting a reminder of what used to be a norm in this country. And the fact that almost immediately, when a Black church is burned down, before investigators can conclude that it is arson, many Black people make that conclusion for themselves, which speaks to a very real anxiety under the surface that many members of the Black community carry with them. The act of burning Black churches is emblematic of the very difficult position Black people have historically been in. The tenuousness, the fact of living in between a rock and a hard place, forced to exist in this land but criminalized and brutalized for trying to create a life worth living in this land. A church is a community's attempt to strike roots in the ground, which seems benign enough, but the Black church has continually come into conflict because certain segments in society only want Black people to live tangentially, on the surface, and in a state of anxiety. The church, when it's at its best, is a bed of ideas, a hub of learning, a center out of which thought spreads outward and through the community, a place to reaffirm one's humanity and worth before God, a place to organize and plan for the future of the community. So when there are people who are uncomfortable with Black people finding permanence, then attacking a center of spirit and culture like the church makes total sense. Some may ask why I, as a Muslim, am so concerned with the Black church. I'm concerned because Black people are my people, and this country is my country, and because I don't want to live in a world where dark-skinned people are perpetually oppressed, where unsubstantiated hatred of the other, whoever that other is, often turns violent. When Prophet Muhammad told us to free the slaves, he didn't say only the Muslim slaves. He just said free the slaves, because people are born free, should live free, and die free. What's interesting and perhaps unique about the burning of Black churches in America is that the perpetuators of these crimes are people who would likely identify as Christians. So this is actually, in an odd way, Christian on Christian violence. That's a fair lens, I think, with which to view it. In other countries, we might tend to see people of different faiths at odds with each other, one group aggressing against another. However, in this country, historically, white on Black hate crimes can usually also be viewed as Christian on Christian hate crimes. And I think it's important to acknowledge, because we don't tend to think of ourselves as a country that has religious violence. In fact, religious freedom is at the center of how we tell the story about ourselves. But the forced conversion of Native populations in the West to Christianity was often done through religious violence. They didn't have religious freedom. The forced conversion of enslaved Africans was often accomplished through religious violence. They didn't have religious freedom. And that threat never really went away, it just morphed. So that if Blacks didn't preach or testify to the kind of feel-good Christianity they were taught, if they didn't practice a humility that was more along the lines of despondency, if they didn't love their oppressors, there was again fear of retribution. So even people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were sometimes criticized for not being quite Christian enough, which was really just code for not sitting back and taking your oppression. The first church burning on record happened in 1822, and that's 40 years prior to emancipation. Probably one of the most well-known incidents of a church burning was the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, which killed 4 girls. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave the eulogy for those 4 young victims. And even during the 90s, over 100 Black churches were burned down. The campaign that my team started, Rebuild with Love, was driven by the principle that all houses of worship are sacred. And the oft-quoted, "All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." The initiative had 3 parts: to raise awareness of the hate crimes afflicted upon these churches, to raise money within the Muslim community in order to help the churches rebuild, to develop a connection with these churches built on a foundation of goodwill. We wanted to send a strong message of support and to stand up against hate. We know that fear can be devastating and crippling, and that even if someone can dust themselves off from hate, it doesn't mean that feeling of having been targeted or violated will permanently go away. We wanted to contribute to dissipating that fear that those congregations must have been feeling by extending a helping hand that they didn't anticipate reaching out to them. We also wanted to make very clear the deep connections between the Black community and the Muslim community, and that 1/3 of American Muslims are Black, and that up to 20% of Africans brought to the Americas to be slaves were Muslims. We wanted to take that message and present it to the Muslim community and say, listen, this is our problem too. So we fundraised within the Muslim community and gave those funds to the churches, and I'm happy to report that those churches are beginning to rise from the ashes. Thank you.